first generation Camaro made a big performance splash with its optional big block 396 cubic inch V8. It reached legendary status via Chevrolet's Copo program, which allowed the Camaro to be ordered in the late 1960s with a multitude of big block 427 cubic inch V8s. When the second generation Camaro arrived in the middle of the 1970 model year, it was quite apparent Chevrolet was moving the Camaro in a different direction. For 1970, the 427 was replaced by the larger displacement big block 454 cubic inch V8. Unfortunately, this engine wasn't available in the Camaro, not even through the Copo program. For big block 1970 Camaro buyers, Chevrolet only offered the 350 horsepower L34 and 375 horsepower L78 396 V8s. Ironically, these engines had a true displacement of 402 cubic inches. Chevrolet had slightly increased the 396's bore from 4.096 inches to 4.125 inches in order to get 402 cubic inches. Though L34 and L78 engines provided plenty of firepower, Chevrolet downplayed them. Chevrolet instead spent its effort touting the 360 horsepower small block LT1 350 cubic inch V8. On the surface, it may have appeared Chevrolet was insane. After all, most of the Camaro's competition had as their top performance motors V8s displacing 400 or more cubic inches. Chevrolet was in fact innovative. It saw the future. It understood a good performance car must not only have great straight-line acceleration prowess, but also great steering and handling manners. Chevrolet understood that a heavy big block V8 added unnecessary extra weight to the front end of a performance car, making fine-tuning the handling a much more difficult endeavor. Not to mention shaving a couple hundred pounds off the weight in the engine bay created a lighter car. In other words, removing pounds is equal to adding horsepower. Chevrolet producing a high horsepower, lower displacement V8 powered car with good handling wasn't born out of ingenuity, but more out of necessity. Chevrolet, after the release of the 1967 Camaro, wanted to be competitive in the engine displacement restricted Trans Am racing circuit. The result was the 1967 to 1969 Camaro Z28, a light, agile performance car with a small displacement, small block 302 cubic inch V8, which produced 290 horsepower and 290 pound-feet of torque. True horsepower was more than this advertised figure. The 302 was a high-revving engine which was made for the oval racetrack, but it was the Z28's F41 handling package that made the Z28 one of the best cars for the oval track during this era. The F41 provided standard front disc brakes and a handling suspension that made the Z28 one of the best handling cars in the late 1960s. When the boxy first-generation Camaro styling was replaced by sleek European sports car type styling for 1970, the Camaro not only looked like a much faster car even when standing still, it had a revised platform that was ready to bring the Camaro to the next performance level. When the Z28 package returned for 1970, Chevrolet could have carried over the 302 V8 from 1969, and the 1970 Camaro Z28 would have been a serious performance car. Chevrolet had something more special in mind: 48 more cubic inches of displacement. It replaced the 302 with an all-new small block LT1 350 cubic inch V8. Where the 302 had a 4-inch bore and a 3-inch stroke, the LT1 350 retained the 4-inch bore, but had a longer 3.48-inch stroke. The LT1 was one of Chevrolet's most revered legendary V8 engines. The magic number that all muscle cars during the golden era tried to aspire to was the 1 horsepower per cubic inch mark. Very few of the most powerful muscle cars during this era obtained this goal. Even the mightiest of muscle cars, such as the 450 horsepower LS6 454 powered 1970 Chevelle SS, fell short of this goal. The LT1 powered 1970 Camaro Z28 made this mark with having a factory rating of 360 gross horsepower and 380 pound-feet of torque. But it gets even better. The 1970 Corvette, when equipped with the same LT1 V8, had a factory rating of 370 gross horsepower. Yet it gets much better. This engine was rated by the National Hot Rod Association, NHRA, at 425 gross horsepower. NHRA knew Chevrolet was fudging the figures and had to rate this motor at 425 horsepower for its events in order to keep its races on the level. In summary, the LT1, even with its high factory horsepower rating, Chevrolet was underrating its power by 13 to 15%. With the 1970 Z28, Chevrolet was essentially giving its customers an honest-to-goodness racing motor. The LT1 had a performance camshaft, solid lifters, a very high 11.0 to 1 compression ratio, a 780 CFM Holley 4-barrel carburetor, a free-flow aluminum intake, free-flow exhaust manifolds, and a low-restriction dual exhaust system. The LT1 on the streets was like a caged lion, seemingly trapped and docile, but still had the potential at any moment to leap out of its cage after its prey. The 1970 Z28 was capable of 14-second quarter-mile times at around 100 to 102 miles an hour. For a 3,600-pound car with early 1970s time period F60 15 tires, this was quite a feat. The LT1 powered Z28 could mix it up with the best of the large displacement muscle cars, even though it had a medium displacement engine. Worth noting, the Z28 was standard with a 373 rear axle ratio. A 410 was optional. The Z28 was standard with a 4-speed manual transmission. A 3-speed automatic was optional. Even though the Z28 had a high-revving ultra-performance engine, just like previous Z28 models, it was a well-balanced machine with phenomenal steering and handling for its day, provided by its standard F41 handling package. Braking was far superior than most of its competitors. Car and Driver magazine obtained a stunning 228-foot stopping distance from an 80 to 0 mile per hour test. The party would only last for 1970. The LT1 would have a massive compression drop to 9.0 to 1 for 1971 in order to accommodate a federal mandate that all new cars starting in 1972 run on unleaded gas. The gross horsepower rating dropped to 330 and the torque to 360 pound-feet. The LT1 would return again for 1972. It was now rated at 255 net horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. Things were not as bad as they seemed, since this horsepower figure was calculated in the more stringent net instead of gross standard. The 1972 LT1 produced the same 330 gross horsepower as the 1971 LT1. The Z28 would return for 1973, but the LT1 would not. The body styling of the 1970 Z28 was nothing short of revolutionary. It had a long hood, a semi-fastback roofline, and was low to the ground. The styling was some of Bill Mitchell's best work. It can be best described as an Americanized version of a Ferrari. The Camaro was standard with a thin, full-length front chrome bumper. If the optional RS package was ordered, the front bumper was replaced by 2 small chrome bumperettes, and the horizontal front parking lights were replaced by round units which were more stylish. The RS package was $168.55, which was a bargain considering how much more attractive it made an already appealing car face appear. To add to the Z28's appeal, Chevrolet included as standard a set of large twin stripes which traversed the hood, trunk lid, and trunk lid spoiler. If a buyer didn't like the stripes, a buyer could delete the stripe package on the order sheet. 4 round rear taillights were a new addition to the Camaro for 1970. They were recessed, giving the rear of the Camaro a modern, stylish, tough look. Unfortunately, Chevrolet would drop this taillight design for 1974. Worth noting, there were two deck lid spoilers found on the 1970 Z28. One had a short height, the other was the taller height spoiler. A front chin spoiler was also part of the Z28 package. Inside the cabin there were standard bucket seats and an attractive dash layout and gauge cluster. It was leagues better than the previous year's Z28. The interior was modern for its time, and its basic shape and layout lasted until the end of the 1981 model year. Yet the interior was all business. It was Spartan. You weren't going to find a lot of optional power and luxury options here. Buyers were going to have to wait almost a decade for that type of opulence in a Camaro. The Z28 may have provided great performance in a sleek, attractive package, but what was so special was it provided a lot of performance value for the American dollar. The base price of a V8 powered Camaro was $2,839. Add to that $572.95 for the Z28 performance package and a few other options, and you still were well under $4,000. Even if you loaded up a Z28 with options and you hit the $4,000 mark, that still was a bargain. $4,000 in 1970 is equivalent to just under $25,000 in 2016 dollars. The Z28 by the late 1970s had transitioned from a racetrack-inspired performance car into a Pontiac Trans Am competitor, which was laden with spoilers, air dams, lots of flashy graphics, and a responsive V8. Who could blame Chevrolet for pushing the Z28 into prime time and phasing out the SS for a few decades? 84,877 Z28s were produced for 1979, which was a 1,000% increase over 1970 production. The Z28 name may have gotten watered down along the way until its movement in recent years back to a high pedestal. There's no doubt that the Z28, which had the perfect mix of pure muscle car, race car, and well-balanced performance touring car, for a reasonable price, was the 1970 Z28.